Sean Neumann. He's a columnist for Rolling Stone magazine. He now joins us on the line here at Behind the Mic. Sean, how are things going tonight?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. Another busy night in the world of sports, as you know. Last night I got a chance to check out this documentary, Sean. We talked before tonight's show off the air as well. I thought they did a great job really covering everything from wall to wall. I didn't know too much about his personal life, and this documentary really did a good job of delving into those areas. What were your initial thoughts on this documentary?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought the same thing. I mean, I knew, obviously about Andre the Giant before, but I think Jason Heher, the director, did a great job diving into a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff with Andre the Giant. I mean, usually with professional wrestling, you don't really get to hear a lot of the actual reality that goes on behind it. They usually try to keep that under wraps, but this documentary really gave you the full image of what was going on behind the scenes, how much pain Andre the Giant kind of lived his life through just to be a professional wrestler, and it really gave you a good insight into the human being behind the character of Andre the Giant.
What was the biggest thing as far as the mythological aspect, all the different myths you heard about Andre the Giant, Sean? What was maybe the one thing that stood out to you? Was it drinking the millions of bottles, I'm exaggerating, course, of wine, although it wasn't that too far off, or all the beers he pounded? I mean, what was the thing that maybe was the most eye-popping to you?
Yeah, I think Ric Flair said in the documentary that at one night he saw Andre the Giant drink 106 beers, and Gene Okerlund said that he would drink a case of wine every morning and stuff. But
incredible.
I mean, just I think the awe. You really get a lot of good imagery. They have a lot of good clips from the 70s and 80s when Andre the Giant was wrestling in these small venues all around North America, and you really get this clear image of all the fans that are kind of around him and just kind of looking up at awe at this human being that just transcended what it was to be a big man in professional wrestling and just to be a big guy in life. You know, he was booked at 7'4". Obviously, that's a professional wrestling promoter's description of how tall he actually was. But I mean, you're talking about a massive man with massive extremities, and I mean, they go into detail about how big his hands were, and you really get a good image of that throughout the documentary. They've got a lot of good clips from the past decades when he was alive in wrestling.
I got a question for you. You know, I was an Andre the Giant fan. I actually had his wrestling figures and things like that when I was younger. You know, knowing him as he was like the villain of the WWF at the time, and you know, it was all about Hulk Hogan. And then, but offset and off camera, he was like this gentle giant. He was like this vicious guy in the ring, but a gentle giant, you know, outside the ring. And people had so many memories about him and things like that. Do you think that with the documentary coming out, that people who haven't really know who Andre the Giant is, that the story that was told it kind of covered both ends of everything about Andre the Giant, who he is as a person, but also who he is as a wrestler?
Yeah, I thought it was like I was saying, it was a great insight into kind of who Andre the Giant was behind the camera, kind of off the camera, you know, like he became famous from his feud with Hulk Hogan, where he portrayed this evil, bad character. But in reality, you get a lot of insight into this documentary into how nice of a, like you said, gentle giant Andre the Giant was. I think a lot of that comes from, they interview people from The Princess Bride that have, I mean, Billy Crystal, Rob Reiner, I think Robin Wright's in there too. All these actors are talking about how he was kind of behind the scenes when they weren't filming on camera, and they really just dive into like how good of a person he was on set. I think there's one part where Robin Wright talks about how they were filming and it was so cold outside, and Andre just comes up and he puts his huge hand over the top of her head almost as a hat, you know, like just like a winter hat just over her head just to keep her warm. And he would just do small things like that all the time, it seems. So yeah, you really get a good insight into just how good of a person he was.
What I didn't know was the fact that he was in so much pain, obviously. This was a guy who was the eighth wonder of the world, bigger than life. He obviously suffered from a condition that caused him his body and his extremities to be larger than most people. And what I learned through the documentary was that he refused any kind of treatment because he thought it would affect his image in wrestling, because this is what he was known as, and that's all he knew. It was his life, was wrestling. So you can kind of see both sides of that one. It was just really fascinating, Sean, to kind of go in and a couple hours to go into the life of him. What was something that you learned that you weren't aware of about him that really helped you to write this article?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware that he was refusing treatment throughout his career. Like you said, I mean, he gave his life to pro wrestling, and it's a pretty noble story. And obviously, he put Hulk Hogan over, which means that he lost to Hulk Hogan voluntarily at WrestleMania 3. He agreed to the script. And that was a pretty impressive point of the documentary and kind of the climax of the story that Jason Howard tells throughout this story, through this film, that Andre the Giant, he was living his life through so much pain. Like you said, he broke his ankle at one point and still tried to wrestle through it. And you get a clip of the doctor telling the story about just how much pain he was in and how he had ankle bones that were the size of a knee bone. He was this gigantic person that his body wasn't supposed to be a professional wrestler. And he was doing it anyways because that's all, like you said, all he knew. And you get to WrestleMania 3. Before WrestleMania 3 was starting to get booked and planned, he told Vince McMahon that I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And and Vince McMahon kind of took that as, if you're like you're done with wrestling, that means he's probably done with his life too, and he's ready to go and just be at peace. And Andre fought through the pain just because Vince McMahon asked him to do one more job and do one more show at WrestleMania 3, and he did the job, and he lost to Hulk Hogan and pushed Hulk Hogan's career and kind of is responsible for how big of a person Hulk Hogan became, and if without Hulk Hogan, professional wrestling wouldn't have been as big. And, there's all these trickle-down effects that Andre the Giant's really responsible for, and you really get a good look into just how respectable Andre the Giant's career was, and all his decision-makings were for the betterment of professional wrestling.
How about Vince McMahon, though, not really even knowing himself if Andre the Giant was going to let Hulk Hogan win in WrestleMania 3.
Yeah.
That was great to me. That was great because deep down, I don't think he really did know. And you got to really credit Andre for being, this is a guy who had a side of him for the theatrics and really played that up entertainment-wise. But I thought that aspect was great. And talking about the history of the WWE and obviously expanding from when Vince McMahon's dad was in charge and from a regional perspective. And that was really interesting to me because, honestly, if you were in these different cities back then, Northeast, Midwest, South, you only saw the guys who fought in those particular cities. You have to actually would have to have traveled somewhere else. That dynamic was fascinating.
Yeah, there's a portion of the documentary that they spend just sort of explaining the territorial days of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and a little bit into the 90s, of where professional wrestling was kind of roped off into different sections all around the world, especially in North America. But you get Andre the Giant, and he's this attraction that kind of travels around and becomes this big guy that your local hero has to face, and that's how he really became a nationally known professional wrestler, and even internationally known. He was fighting in Japan and stuff. But yeah, like you said, also like you said, he had a really good sense of humor, and he was kind of toying with Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon before WrestleMania 3, and just kind of just dragging him along, making him freak out a little bit about whether or not the match is going to go how they planned it to go. And, it ended up going exactly how they planned. But Hulk Hogan, as he describes in the documentary, didn't know until the very last minute that he was going to actually win and how the match was going to end. It's a really fascinating story into the most famous professional wrestling match of all time.
Listening and actually listening to you guys talk about the documentary, because I didn't see the previews of it. I read the article though of it. But looking at this, there should be a movie about Andre the Giant, to be honest with you, in theaters. I mean, look, I mean, you have we had talked about the Joe Paterno thing, and they're having a movie coming out. They had a movie come out on HBO about that. But honestly, I wonder if they really considered doing an actual movie to big screen on Andre the Giant, because this story just alone of us, looking at the article and you guys talking about the documentary a little bit, him fight within himself, that's a movie within itself. I think that it should go to big screen. People will definitely watch it. I mean, Andre the Giant's an icon. He's an icon wrestler. You know what I mean?
Tell me an actor that you can get to play Andre the Giant, though. He's not just a once-in-a-lifetime wrestler, but a once-in-a-lifetime human being, you know?
Yeah.
Pretty big guy. So that would be my question if I was a director. Where would I find an actor that could truly portray how big Andre the Giant was? But I agree with you. It's a fascinating story, and there should be some movies coming out. Hopefully they'll work on that.
It would be great. Maybe this will serve as somewhat of a prelude to that. We shall see. Yeah, that's a great point. That there's only maybe a handful of actors or so who could actually fit that role and accurately.
I think it would have to actually be from the WWE.
Yeah, right. They might have to dip into that. They might have to.
Yeah.
I mean, the next biggest person I can think of, big like Andre the Giant, is who? Maybe Kane or Mark.
Big
Henry?
Show.
Big Show.
Mark Henry. Yeah.
Big Show. Put Big Show in there with an afro. And there you go.
Yeah.
I mean,
that could work.
That would absolutely work, you know. But you're absolutely right. And let me tell you, after seeing the documentary, how does it change the WWE? Like some of these newer wrestlers coming in and really didn't know who. I mean, of course, I'm pretty sure they did their homework and know who Andre the Giant was, but really didn't really know him as a person. How does this change the WWE in a way of like the history of it, and for these guys, like what is it you think it does for these wrestlers that are up and coming now and seeing a documentary like this?
It's very inspiring for the current wrestlers all across the world, not just in WWE, but all across the promotions that are everywhere and kind of growing, especially in Japan and stuff like that. But I mean, that's kind of how professional wrestling locker rooms work, is that there's these older veterans that come in and they know the ropes, no pun intended, but they know how things go, and they kind of pass the knowledge down to the younger guys. And it's a really almost like a gigantic family, the history of professional wrestling, where things are just passed down. And Andre the Giant, sort of the grandfather of that. And I think you can really, it's a great thing that you can have this documentary and get some of the knowledge and some of that heart that is in Andre the Giant's career and get that from him without him obviously being alive at this point. So I think it's an extremely valuable piece for anyone interested in professional wrestling, just to learn how the business goes and just learn how, I guess, quote unquote, how people should act in their professional wrestling careers. And I think he's kind of a standard bearer for that.
Sean Neumann joining us from Rolling Stone. Another thing that stood out to me in this documentary towards the end was Andre somewhat passing the torch off to Hulk Hogan after WrestleMania 3. Didn't really know too much about that story and how that eventually played out, but it obviously that's exactly what happened, and it really helped to launch Hogan into even more stardom, even more so than what he was at that point in time.
And you know what else is just interesting you say that, Brad, because, you know, there was a lot of going on at that time, like that, you know, Hulk Hogan was coming. He was an up-and-coming rising star at the time, and it was like he said, you didn't know, Vince McMahon didn't even know if Andre the Giant was going to let him like win that match. And then this how he won was a body slam and then a leg drop.
Yeah,
like that was big by Andre the Giant getting body slammed by Hulk Hogan and then the leg drop, and then that was it. But that was, you know, that was a big deal at the time, you know, because Andre the Giant was the man. So it's interesting to, like when you said that, it's kind of interesting to hear that, because, you know, Andre the Giant was, you know, I think it was very hard for the WWF. They didn't know what was going to happen when they lost Andre the Giant, from what I gather. They didn't know what was going to happen, and now you see Hulk Hogan came in and he's become an icon within himself. But yeah, Andre the Giant definitely lifted him to surpass him, so I definitely have to agree with you on that.
HBO really did this documentary justice, Andre the Giant. I don't think they really missed out on anything. It was an hour and a half just about, and that's what you want to see. A lot of times these documentaries are an hour or just under and doesn't really fully do it justice. But this one, I think they hit the nail on the head.
Yep, I agree. I definitely think it's a must-watch for anyone even slightly interested in professional wrestling, or just to see a little and learn a little bit more about Andre the Giant's life and career.
Well put. Follow him on Twitter, by the way, at Neumann the Human. Sean, really appreciate the time here tonight. Great article. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely do so. 10 Things We Learned from HBO's Andre the Giant documentary right now on rollingstone.com. We appreciate the time, Sean. Thanks so much, and we hope to talk to you again sometime soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.